Hey folks, welcome back to EarthSky. My guest today is Or Graur again. Or is an associate professor of astrophysics at the University of Portsmouth in England, and his work also digs deeply, explores connections between ancient traditions and the Milky Way, the cosmos, but specifically today we'll be talking about the Milky Way. Welcome back, Or. I am so glad to have you back after we got cut off.
It's good to be here again. I hope this time everything works.
I think we're going to be. I think we're going to be good, folks. If you haven't seen it yet, Or and I had a fascinating conversation about ancient Egypt, and that was last week. So if you're a subscriber to the channel, you probably already got to see this, and you folks asked for more. So here it is. The rest of you who aren't subscribers, you can hit the button, and I believe if it's not there, there will be a link to that video in the description. It's also on our web page. It's also on our YouTube channel. But anyway, today we are picking up with our conversation, but first we've got brand new stories, well, at least new to us, to explore, and we're going to go down to ancient Mexico. This is the age of the Aztecs, and the Tlacotec, I'm probably mispronouncing it. Those are the two peoples here we're visiting. Actually, we're visiting just the latter, and I'm going to let Or say that properly. Go ahead, Or. Who are we looking at here? What's going on in this scene? Tell us about this guy.
So we're looking at one page out of a book called the Codex Borgia. There are a few codicils, a few of these books in different hands. And this, for a while, this was a mystery, right? What exactly are we seeing here? Is there a narrative? What does it mean? And who are all these different characters? What I find interesting here, the reason that we're showing this, is because some of the pages in the Codex Borgia include this elongated character that you see here at the bottom. Some anthropologists call her a skirt goddess, but there's one anthropologist called Susan Milbrath who thinks that this skirt goddess is actually a goddess called Citlallique, who was mother of the gods and mother of the stars, and she is thought to be the Milky Way. So we have here this elongated being, and she is studded with stars, these white and red objects. These are stars, and you can see that her body is split open, and she's giving birth to a black god called Quetzalcoatl, and he is associated with the planet Venus. And now Susan Milbrath wrote a book about the Codex Borgia, and she assumed that each page in the Codex was correlated to a specific date in the Aztec calendar of festivals. And that gave her a way to calendarize this, to say, well, each page shows us the sky on a specific day. And she then also assumed that a given year, she assumed that this was a year when I think there was a solar eclipse, and then she could recreate what the sky looked like from central Mexico on each of these nights. And from that, she came to the conclusion that, one, this is Citlallique when she's the Milky Way. And on the pages where she's shown giving birth to Quetzalcoatl, what we're seeing is Venus crossing the Milky Way. If you've listened to our previous interview, you'll know that I tend to be very skeptical. But she makes very compelling arguments. Her book is, I think, really, really incredibly well thought out, and she goes into a lot more details than I just did.
Okay, so that kind of pulls us back into our conversation from last week, because that sounds like an awfully familiar story to me. So here we have, this is Newt. This is the I guess a parallel goddess from ancient Egypt that we talked about in the last stream. Can you bring us up to date and tell us what's going on here and how that relates back? I guess we need to talk about the motifs, right? You mentioned we have 5 motifs. So why don't you tell us about the themes, remind us who Nut is and how this all blends.
Okay. So first of all, what we're seeing here is a small section from the Book of the Dead, which included spells to help the deceased make their way through the afterlife and onto the Egyptian version of heaven, the Fields of Reeds. And here specifically, we're seeing what's called the cosmological vignette. We see Nut, this arched woman covered in stars. She is the sky, and the sky is arched over her brother Geb. He's reclining here at the bottom. He's covered in reeds because he's the earth. And the two of them, they're separated, and the sky is held up by their father, Shu, who is the god of the atmosphere. And there's a lot more going on here, because this is the Book of the Dead from the New Kingdom, and during the New Kingdom, they had to throw in everything into their paintings. But we'll leave that out now. Let's just concentrate on Nut. Right. Okay. So here again, we have a goddess who represents the sky, and she's also shown as an elongated figure covered in stars. And she's also the mother of some very important gods, Osiris, Isis, Nephthys, and Seth. So last year, when I started researching this, this was part of a larger project where I was looking at the multicultural mythology of the Milky Way. And I started seeing these parallels, an ancient Egyptian elongated goddess of the sky, a Central Mexican, pre-Columbian elongated goddess of the sky. And that was just one of many of these connections that I saw. Basically, when I went into this, when I started collecting stories about the Milky Way, I expected to see lots and lots of different stories, lots of different names, because we like to say the human imagination has no limits, right? But I kept seeing very similar stories, very similar names. And I found that there were basically 5 motifs that kept recurring. The Milky Way was conceptualized as a river, a road, a god, an animal, or a conduit between this life and the next. And there are stories that have nothing to do with these motifs. And on the other side, you have stories that incorporate some or even all of these motifs. And I came to the conclusion that there has to be some underlying human imagination from which all of this is borrowed, so that whenever we look up at the sky, and by we, I mean any culture, at any point in history, anywhere in the world, we tend to see similar things. We see similar constellations. We sometimes even tell similar stories about them. And when we see the Milky Way, we keep coming up with the same images, which I have to say this again, it tells me that there is something that is shared across cultures, across the world, across time. We have this underlying imagination, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, it does suggest itself over and over again. Why don't we continue our journey through the American Southwest? We've got some more examples from there. The first one is from the Diné, the Navajo. Tell us about this beautiful image.
I'll connect it to the interview we had last week. So last week we talked at length about Nut, and that's not a pun. And we talked about a specific image from a coffin that's in Ukraine, in which Nut is not only covered in stars, but there's also a wavy black line that bisects her body from the tips of her toes from the tips of her fingers to the down to her toes. And I show this image and the image after this in my new paper, because again, I had seen this idea of the Milky Way as a wavy black line or some kind of wavy line in other places. So what we're seeing here, this is a Navajo sand painting. It's a modern one. It's by a modern artist, contemporary, I should say. Right. On the left, in yellow, we're seeing Mother Earth, and she in her center there's a lake, and out of that lake sprout the 4 important crops of the Diné. We have corn, tobacco, and beans and squash. And on the right, we have Father Sky. And Father Sky is shown in black. This is the night sky, and you can see stars, and you can see the sun and moon with horns of power. And across his arms and shoulders, we have this zigzag pattern. And this zigzag pattern is the Milky Way. And not only that, but, again, we have this image of 2 spiritual beings, one representing the earth, another representing the sky. That's something we see in a lot of different cultures. Here, the earth is female and the sky is male. And you can see it here because this isn't a ceremonial painting. So some things are left out, but in ceremonial paintings, they are also connected. And you can think of this as a 2-dimensional rendering of a 3-dimensional world, where Father Sky is arched above Mother Earth.
Okay, so I think what we should mention here is that you mentioned some things that the ritualistic elements are not represented here, and that's for a very good reason. This is a living practice. This is still ongoing, and it is an ancient practice, but it is also a current practice. And so out of a sense that this is the lives of these people, we are kind of respecting that here, right?
Yes, it's also why this painting was made by a Navajo artist, but for outside consumption.
Exactly.
There are certain things about it which mean that it doesn't have or shouldn't have the same potency as the sand paintings made by chanters during ceremonials. Right. I don't show those.
You would not discover this inside a Hogan. Okay, but we do have these. Now these, you might find authentic ones. What are these? Tell us about these icons.
So first of all, we should say the previous painting is also authentic in the sense that it is made by a Navajo artist. These on the left in color, we have a Hopi Katsina called Sunguka. This is also a contemporary piece, very, very, very contemporary, as in just a couple of years ago. And if you look, you can see that down its head and across its snout, you have these zigzag lines in blue and yellow, and in the center you have this dotted white line. This, I think, is the Milky Way. Sunguka itself means Milky Way, and this is billed as a Milky Way Katsina. Now, on the right, we have a Zuni Katsina. Zuni is one of the pueblos in New Mexico. And this Katsina is called Kiaklo. And on top of its head, there are 2 curves. the one that you can see most clearly here is one that's checkered, black with white stripes going through. And that's the Milky Way. Now, there are connections between these three cultures. The Navajos, the Hopi, the Zuni, and the other Pueblos, they all live in the same region of the southwestern US. And they have cultural connections. So there is cultural diffusion between them. So some of these ideas might have moved between them. But as far as I know, there is nothing to connect between them and the ancient Egyptians who made the paintings that we were looking at more than 3,000 years ago.
So I think what you're getting at, to sum up, is that some ideas require no prompting, that they arise independently. Everybody sees a particular thing, which is pareidolia is one of these effects where everyone tends to see faces and things. You wanted to tell us an African story of the we. I hope I'm coming close to that. I practiced.
I don't know.
These are the Bushmen of Botswana. If you're familiar with them, they have a story of their own. We don't have any artwork to go with this one, so if you just wanted to relate it to us.
No, but this is so. This is again, this is connected to Nut and me trying to understand whether she is connected to the Milky Way or not. One of the major origin stories or mythologies in ancient Egypt has to do with the solar cycle. And according to the solar cycle, the sun sails across the sky during the day, and as it sets in the west in the evening, it's swallowed by Nut, and then it travels through her body, through which for a time was seen as the underworld. So it travels through her body, and when I say sun, you should think both sun and king, because the kings of Egypt saw themselves as living embodiments of the sun, and so the sun / king, they sail through the netherworld. They're dead at this stage, but at midnight, at the midpoint of their journey, they meet Osiris, the king of the underworld, and Osiris re-enervates them. He brings them back to life, and then they continue their journey, and then they can be reborn. So the Nut gives birth to them again, and they rise in the east, and then the sun can rise to travel across the sky for another day, and the king can become a star and join the imperishable stars who live forever. So the Gui have a story about their creator god called Nadima, and how in the evening Nadima takes away the light by biting the head of the sun, and then he leads the remainder of the sun's body across different paths, one of which is the Milky Way, and during the night, while the sun moves along this path, it regrows its head and then rises again in the east. And so when I saw that story, I was checking to see whether there were any echoes of Nut, her description, or the different stories in contemporary African stories. And this was the standout. This one, when I read it, I said, this looks exactly like the Egyptian solar cycle. But Botswana is in the very southern part of Africa, and Egypt is in the northeastern corner. And Africa is a huge continent, okay? And there's the Sahara Desert that separates between Egypt and Libya and Morocco and North Africa and what's called Sub-Saharan Africa. On top of that, there's also 3,000 years, at least, between the solar cycle, the Egyptian solar cycle, which was kept alive, at least into the end of Roman times. So, at least 1,500 years, and the story today. So I can't claim there's a link. I cannot claim that one came from the other. All I can say is either this is an echo, or this is another example of how, once again, we draw from the same imagination to tell very similar stories about the night sky.
It really does. It really does put emphasis. Either case is made by this example. I think, if we can dig more deeply and find out some of the origin. Speaking of that, let's go over to Japan now, or China, Japan and China here. We've got this pair of star-crossed individuals. Tell us about them. Who are they? What are they doing here?
I'm glad you used that word. They are the original star-crossed lovers. So this is a Japanese print from the 19th century. It's from the Edo period, of a very famous Chinese story about the cowherd and the weaver girl. And the story goes that there was a weaver girl. You can think of her as a type of fairy or sub-goddess. She was in charge of weaving the clouds. And one day, as she was going about her work, she looked down on the earth, and she saw a mortal cowherd herding his cattle. And she was smitten, and she came down to talk to him. And they ended up talking all night long, and they fell deeply in love, and they eloped. They had 2 sons, and they lived happily ever after. They lived happily together for a while until the Emperor of Heaven noticed her absence, and he sent his soldiers to find her and retrieve her, and they dragged her back up to heaven. And then the Emperor of Heaven drew a silver river across the sky, that's the Milky Way, in order to separate between the lovers. And that's why these lovers, who in the night sky are I'm blanking on the 2 stars.
Which constellations?
No, they're 2 very specific stars.
Okay. Well, that's okay. We get the idea, but
Vega and Altair. So there are Vega and Altair, who are on either side of the Milky Way.
Yes.
And the story continues that the 2 lovers can meet for 1 night every year on the 7th day of the 7th month, when a flock of magpies temporarily forms a bridge over the Silver River, and the weaver girl can cross the bridge and come down to earth and be with her husband and sons for 1 night. Mm-hmm. And this night, the seventh night of the 7th month, is a festival that is still it's still celebrated in China, and it is said that if it rains on the night of that festival, those are the weaver girl's tears, as she knows that she will have to go back up the next day. This is the original Chinese story. And now here, this is an example of cultural diffusion. China was a cultural behemoth, still is. And this story spread into Japan and Korea and Vietnam. And today, the Milky Way is still known in those countries as either the Silver River or the Heavenly River. And those countries still celebrate this very festival. In Japan, for example, it's called Tanabata. I don't remember right now the names in the other countries, but it is still celebrated to this very day.
Fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. And that's not the only, these legends live on in our lives and they guide our lives. And so here's another one. This one is from the Chumash people of medieval.
Now, this is from Ukraine. This is
right,
it's just Ukrainians.
Yes, we're on the Black Sea now, and these are Adrovian people.
So whereas the previous story was one that showed the Milky Way as a river, this is one that shows the Milky Way as a road. And so this is called the Chumash Road. The Chumash were drovers. You can think of them as the truckers of medieval Ukraine. And one of the major goods that they moved around was salt from the salt mines. And some of that salt would spill behind. And that's the Milky Way. That's the Chumash Road, the salt that was spilled behind these ox carts. Now, there's a very similar story that is now prevalent in the Arabian Peninsula, the Middle East, North Africa, and some parts of Central Asia, where the Milky Way is known as the straw path. And the story there is that this thing was created when farmers coming back from the field left straw behind them, either from their carts or from the sacks that they carried, and that created the same kind of road. Now, is there a link between Ukraine and Central Asia? Where does that story come from? We think it's an Arab story to begin with, but its origins are still unclear. I actually have a student now, Rahman Farsi, who is trying to find the origins of this name in Arabic, Darb al-Tabana. And she still hasn't gotten to it.
Great. That's great. So the search continues to the present day with these things. Why don't we get back across the ocean into the Americas, and we'll look at this picture. This is something, I believe it's called the Inca Mayu. And tell us about this. What are we looking at here? We're back where we started, so this will be a good place to round up our talk.
So we're looking again at a contemporary painting. This is a contemporary painting that's showing the Milky Way, which to the Inca is still Maya. I'm sorry.
The Maya.
No, Inca.
Not Inca,
both.
the Maya.
This is Inca. But both the Maya and Inca call the Milky Way Mayu. This is a celestial river. It's the celestial river from where all rivers originate. So if you think about the water cycle, the waters of the great rivers spill into the sky, and you get the Milky Way, you get Mayu, and that spills back down to Earth. And here specifically, what we're looking at is the dark constellations in the Milky Way. So if you look up at the Milky Way, you see that there are black patches. We call this the Great Rift.
Right.
And the Inca see constellations in these nebulae, in these black patches between the stars. And they see these as different animals who have come to drink from the celestial river. And so you have a llama and its baby, you have a specific type of bird, a tinamu, you have a toad, a fox, a snake, and you have a human shepherd as well. Now, all the way across the world in Australia, the Australians also see dark constellations in the Milky Way. But they don't see many different dark constellations. They see one big constellation in the shape of an emu, the big flightless bird that's related to ostriches. And so this is the celestial emu. And they can tell there's a calendrical association. So during the year, the emu starts to rise up in the sky. And when you see different parts of the emu, you know that certain things should be done. For example, you know that you can go and collect emu eggs because now they'll be good for eating.
So these are practical things as well. These were not just something that they did to entertain themselves in the long and dark nights. That's fascinating.
We should remember that astronomy is still practical in many cultures. In Judaism and in Islam, all holidays, all festivals are set by the lunar calendar. And you need to be able to tell exactly when a new moon appears. And that's why, for example, so to everyone in the US, if you have any Jewish friends, this is why in the US, the Passover Seder is celebrated twice. Whereas in Israel, it's only celebrated once. And that's because anywhere outside Israel, there's a certain uncertainty about when exactly a new moon is observed over Jerusalem. And so that uncertainty is taken into account by having two dinners.
Right. And, it's not just, well, it's all of the Judeo-Christian religions that use that. Christmas is a fixed holiday of the calendar, but Easter moves with the cycle of the moon. Yes. And Asian, many, if not all of the Buddhist religions. I'm not a scholar, but I do observe that they have many lunar festivals and such. So, or again, another fascinating talk. You are a natural teacher, sir. I had a great time. I had learned a whole lot here. Thank you so much again for joining us. And I'm going to thank our audience. If you'll hang around backstage, I will talk to you back there. So let me pop down here and say my goodbye to you folks. And thank you for showing up. We are here every weekday at this time. It's 17:15 Universal Time Coordinate. I'd leave it to you to work out what that means for you. Tomorrow, we will be back in the modern age, this time New York City and Manhattan Henge. We've got a solar alignment. It's a seasonal occurrence, and we'll be back tomorrow to tell you all about it. Subscribe so you don't miss that. Like this one, because I know you got something out of it. This was a fun one. Folks, one Earth, one sky, EarthSky. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time.